I've been working until 9 when I realized I'd left my phone in the office. On my way back, the entire floor was dark except for the light spilling from Victoria Hayes' office. The door was slightly ajar. I saw her bury her face deep into my blazer. Her breathing was quick, obsessive, nothing like the cool, formidable CEO she was during the day. The moment I pushed the door and it creaked, she looked up, her eyes wide with panic. A crimson blush spread instantly from her cheeks to the tips of her ears, making her look almost like a little girl caught doing something wrong. Before I could get out the classic, "I didn't see anything," she hissed a threat at me. "If you say a word, I'll kill you." My phone was probably on my desk. The thought surfaced as I stood downstairs, shivering in the night wind. The city was still alive at 9 p.m., but its glittering chaos was sealed away behind panes of glass, leaving only the sound of wind howling between the skyscrapers. So I went back up. The entire floor was submerged in the dim, energy-saving darkness, except for a thin line of light escaping from the end of the hall, the CEO's office. The door was ajar, not closed properly. That was unusual. Victoria did things the way she was, meticulous with an extreme need for boundaries and precision. She would never allow such a lapse in her personal space. I slowed my steps, my pace softening as I approached. The instant my fingertips touched the cool wood of the door, the scene in the gap between the door and its frame made my thoughts grind to a halt. She had her back to me. Her crisp blazer was tossed casually over the back of her chair, leaving her in a silk-white blouse that clung to the seductive lines of her body, and in her hands, she was clutching my gray blazer. My work blazer. She buried her face into it, deeply, forcefully, pressing herself into the fabric that still held a trace of my body heat, my scent. Her body was visibly trembling, and even from a short distance, I could hear her breathing. It was a repressed, greedy, desperate sound. I froze in the doorway, blood rushing to my head and then draining away just as fast. My brain refused to process the absurd, incomprehensible scene before me. This couldn't be Victoria Hayes. The same Victoria Hayes who at 29 ran a massive public company. The woman whose rebukes could make seasoned department heads tremble. The door hinge must have needed oiling. As I leaned against it unconsciously, it let out a long, grating creak that set my teeth on edge. In dead silence, the tiny sound exploded like a thunderclap. She flinched violently and whipped her head around. Our eyes met. All the color drained from her face. Her lips parted slightly. In her eyes, usually filmed over with a layer of ice, there was now only pure, unadulterated panic and a kind of raw, naked shame that comes from having her deepest secret torn open. She didn't even remember to let go of my blazer, which she was still clutching tightly in her hands. Time seemed to freeze for a second or maybe a century. Then a horrifying tide of red washed over her face with visible speed. Even her ears turned so red they looked like they might bleed. As I tried to stammer out the classic line, I didn't see anything. I just got here. She moved first. Her lips trembled so badly it took her a few tries to force out a sound. The pitch was high, wavering, and wrapped in a desperate ferocity. If you say a word." She paused, sucking in a breath. A humiliating sheen of moisture filmed her eyes, but she stared daggers at me, completing her entirely unconvincing threat in a broken, forced tone. "I'll kill you." Let's rewind 4 years. The air still smelled faintly of new paint and drywall. The office wasn't nearly as spacious or impressive as it is now. We only rented half a floor in the building. That was when I first joined the company, back when Victoria's firm was just getting off the ground. To be honest, when I submitted my resume and saw her for the first time at the interview, all thoughts of career paths and growth potential faded into the background. Her incredible figure was encased in a sharp, tailored black suit. Her long, straight black hair felt like a waterfall, making her pale face look even more refined and exquisite. She was so beautiful it was hard to look away. My heart skipped several beats during that interview. Later, I pieced together her story. She was the only daughter of the CEO of a renowned local conglomerate. She could have easily stepped into a cushy job at the family business, but she insisted on starting from scratch to prove herself. Things were tough at first. Projects were hard to land. Funds were always low, and employees came and went like water through a sieve. Desks were often empty. A colleague you were sharing a cigarette and complaints with one day might be handing in their resignation the next. I stayed. Maybe at first it was because of that secret crush on the boss. But later, it was more about watching her. Watching her carry all that pressure alone, working late into the night, revising proposals over and over in an empty office. That slender but unyielding silhouette of her back just made you want to watch a little longer. The company gradually found its footing and began to thrive. She became more decisive, more demanding, bordering on a perfectionist. Employees were replaced one batch after another. Not many could keep up with her pace. The offices got bigger, the decor more luxurious, but the icy aura around her also grew stronger. She never gave me my own office. From the very beginning, my desk was set up inside her CEO's suite. Other colleagues sometimes whispered about it, speculating that it was for maximum efficiency to ensure I was always on call and that information flowed seamlessly. For a time, I believed that too. But the reality was that most of the time, the vast office was steeped in silence. She handled her documents, and I managed my tasks. Aside from necessary directives and work reports, we had almost no extra interaction. She was always frowning slightly, her gaze fixed on a screen or a page. All I could hear was the crisp tapping of her keyboard and the occasional rustle of paper. Back then, I just thought the silence was a product of her strict, impersonal nature. I never imagined it could be another form of closeness. During breaks from the high-intensity work, she would occasionally stop typing, lift the cup of perpetually warm coffee to her lips, and take a sip. Then, her gaze would seem to land on me, as if by accident. The questions always came without warning. "Any plans for the weekend?" she'd ask, her eyes still on her computer screen, as if it were just a casual thought. "You seem to be good at picking out fruit. Any tricks?" she'd ask one afternoon when a fruit platter was delivered, suddenly looking up at me. And even more personal things. "How did you and your girlfriend meet?" Every time, the muscles in my back would tense up instinctively. Alarms would go off in my head. I remembered clearly a colleague from the sales department had been chatting with her during a lunch break and excitedly shared his plans to get married and have kids soon. A week later, he was transferred out of his core position with the reasoning that he might not be able to fully commit to high-intensity work. He quit not long after. The president was a bloody one. So my answers were always meticulously calibrated, proper, safe, and devoid of any real information. Just resting at home this weekend, recharging. For fruit, I just pick what looks fresh. No real trick to it. "Ms. Hey, I'm single right now. My focus is on my work." I thought my answers were flawless, perfectly fitting the persona of an elite executive assistant. But every time I gave one of these responses, her cool eyes would linger on my face for a second or two. The light in them seemed to flicker slightly, a fleeting, unreadable emotion flashing through them, like disappointment. Then she would give a soft "Hm," avert her gaze, and lower her eyes. After that, she wouldn't speak again, refocusing on the documents or screen in front of her. The sound of her typing would seem a little harder, a little faster than before. The office would once again fall into that familiar, almost suffocating silence. That office gradually became a cage that I found both prestigious and suffocating. Aside from bathroom breaks, she seemed to assume my sphere of activity should be confined to that one area. Even when I tried to nap on the sofa during my lunch break, I could feel her gaze on me, making my back stiffen, unable to truly relax. One time around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, the sun was making me drowsy. The only sounds in the office were keyboards and rustling paper. The air felt as thick as solid. A powerful urge to escape seized me. I stood up, trying to make my voice sound as natural as possible. "Ms. Hayes, I'm just going to use the restroom." She didn't look up, just gave a slight nod, her eyes still glued to a file. The moment I walked out that door, the air in the open-plan office outside felt freer. I let out a long breath. Just then, I saw Jenna from admin, who I was friendly with, making coffee in the break room. I walked over almost eagerly, hoping a little small talk would dispel the strange tightness in my chest. We were talking about a recent movie. Our laughter was quiet, but still somewhat audible in the relatively peaceful office. Just as Jenna was describing a funny scene, I caught a figure in the corner of my eye. Victoria was standing at the entrance to the break room. Her expression was blank, her eyes as cold as ice. The air in the entire office instantly froze. All the whispers and keyboard clicks vanished. Colleagues reflexively ducked their heads, pretending to be busy. Her voice wasn't loud, but it seemed to carry clearly to everyone's ears. "Does this company pay you to stand around and chat during work hours?" Her gaze swept over Jenna, whose face had gone pale before landing squarely on me. There wasn't a trace of warmth in her eyes, only a heavy brewing anger and humiliation. "Especially you," she said, staring at me, each word hitting the floor like a stone. "Get back to your station now." Countless pairs of eyes, sympathetic, curious, gloating, pricked my back like needles. My face burned with shame. To everyone else, I was probably just some pathetic loser whose bathroom breaks were micromanaged. I followed her back to the office in silence. The door clicked shut behind us. She didn't go back to her desk right away. She stood in front of me, her chest rising and falling slightly, the anger she had suppressed now fully on display. "Have I been too lenient with you? Has it made you think you can slack off during work hours, laughing and chatting with others?" For a moment, it felt absurd. I just stepped out for 2 minutes to say a few words. "Write an apology," she commanded. Her voice was flat, but it carried an undeniable force. "Right now by hand." My mouth twitched uncontrollably. An apology? By hand? What century is this? I felt like I'd been yanked back to elementary school, being punished by the teacher for talking in class. But she was the boss. I silently took out a pen and paper and spread them on my desk, the one right next to hers. She didn't even return to her own chair. She just stood beside me, arms crossed, looking down at me. The air was terrifyingly thick. The only sound was the scratching of my pen on the paper. "Not sincere enough," she said suddenly, her cold fingertip tapping on the line I had just written. I recognized that I should not engage in idle chat during work hours. "You need a promise. Promise you will never do it again." I swallowed hard and added, as instructed, "I promise to remain completely focused during work hours and will not slack off or engage in idle chat again." She seemed slightly more satisfied. She took the piece of paper, which felt as light as a feather but as heavy as lead, glanced at it, then folded it in half and in half again. She tucked it into the inner pocket of her blazer, right over her heart. At that moment, the gesture struck me as bizarre. She finally returned to her desk. The office fell back into a dead silence, as if nothing had happened. I was more certain than ever that she was just furious with an unfocused employee, that her strictness had reached a pathological level until a few days later. It was another stifling afternoon, and that familiar urge to get some fresh air washed over me again. On a whim, I slipped out of the office once more. This time, I ran into Mark from the IT department. We stood by the hallway window, chatting about the latest video games. As we were talking, that familiar ice-cold pressure hit me from behind. My heart sank. I stood up straight, almost by reflex, bracing myself for another storm and another handwritten apology. Victoria stood there, her gaze shifting between me and Mark. Her expression was still devoid of warmth, but it didn't seem to hold the same dark, terrifying rage as last time. She didn't say anything. In fact, when I followed her back to the office, ready to proactively pull out a pen and paper, she surprisingly didn't mention anything about an apology or slacking off. She just walked silently to the coffee machine, poured a cup of freshly ground black coffee, and then placed it on my desk. The rich aroma of coffee filled the air. I stared at the steaming cup, then looked up at her, already seated back at her desk. I was completely stunned. What did this mean? Was it just because Mark was a guy? An absurd, almost impossible idea struck me like a bolt of lightning, but I immediately forced it back down. The fragments of memory coalesced, and my vision refocused on the CEO's office right in front of me. The air still seemed to hold the echo of her panicked breaths and that utterly toothless threat. "If you say a word, I'll kill you." The beginning of this whole mess could probably trace back to just a few hours ago. That day had been a relentless battle. As her executive assistant and driver, I had accompanied her across the city, rushing from one emergency meeting to another corporate gala. She was like a tireless, precision-engineered machine, handling all sorts of people, her every word and action impeccable. It was late by the time the final event ended. Snow had started to fall at some point, fine flakes swirling in the glow of the streetlights. I opened the back door of the car for her, but she didn't get out right away. The dim light inside the car traced her silhouette. She was leaning her head against the window, a faint smell of alcohol on her breath. "I'm drunk," she said suddenly. Her voice was a little slurred, but in the haze, her eyes were exceptionally bright as she looked at me. "I can't walk." I paused. She had only taken a few token sips of champagne at the gala. Given her tolerance, there was no way she was drunk. She was lying, but I didn't call her out on it. I just silently took off my suit jacket, leaned into the car, and gently draped it over her. Then I turned my back to her and crouched down slightly. "Get on, Miss Hayes." She seemed to hesitate for a few seconds. Then a warm body, smelling of wine and expensive perfume, settled onto my back. She was light. I carried her, walking step by step toward the office building. Snow fell on my hair. The late-night street was empty. The only sounds were footsteps and the soft hiss of the falling snow. She lay quietly on my back. At first, her body was stiff, but then she slowly relaxed. Then I felt a faint, warm touch on my neck. She had buried her face deep into the crook of my neck, like she was seeking refuge. Her breath tickled my skin, intimate and warm. I knew she wasn't drunk. She was just tired. So tired that she had let down all her defenses. So tired that she needed to use such a clumsy excuse to draw a tiny, insignificant bit of warmth and support. In that moment, in the silent, snowy night, my heart was pounding like a drum. We didn't speak the rest of the way. I finally got her back to the top floor office and settled her on the sofa, but she grabbed the hem of my shirt, not letting me leave. Eventually, she drifted off into a deep sleep. And it was only after I made sure she was comfortable that I remember my phone was probably downstairs, which led to me coming back up, which led to that half-open door and the shocking secret behind it. And now, standing here, facing her look of utter shame and humiliation, her bright red ears. All those days and nights, she had forced me to stay in the office. All those seemingly intrusive personal questions. The fury that erupted because I was joking with a female colleague. And that handwritten apology. All the fragmented, illogical pieces suddenly connected. I opened my mouth and, tempting fate, asked, "Miss Hayes, do you like my scent?" Victoria's head shot up. Her eyes, still misty with shame, widened even more. "You." She took a sharp step forward, nearly crashing into me, her cold fingers grabbing the collar of my shirt. She had to tilt her head up to maintain her fierce glare, but the rapid rise and fall of her chest and the blush that was once again flooding her cheeks completely betrayed her tough facade. "Shut up," she hissed through gritted teeth, her voice trembling with haste and emotion. "Forget it. Everything you just saw. Forget all of it. Do you hear me?" Her grip on my collar tightened, as if to add weight to her threat, but that only pulled us closer. I could even see the fine, damp moisture on her eyelashes. Before I could offer any kind of response, not even a syllable, she let go abruptly, as if she had been burned. Then, almost as if she were fleeing, she grabbed her own blazer from the back of the chair, didn't dare to look at me again, and rushed for the door with her head down. The clicking of her heels on the floor had lost its usual confident rhythm, sounding hurried and clumsy. Bang! The office door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the silent floor before finally fading back into nothing. The next day, she showed up at the office on time. Her makeup was even more flawless than usual, a clear attempt to hide the faint dark circles under her eyes. The way she walked, the force with which she typed, even the way she flipped through documents. Everything was done with excessive, deliberate effort. She didn't look at me or mention a single word about last night. It was as if the whole fiasco had been a figment of my imagination. I played along, silently handling my work, delivering files, and brewing coffee. But every time I got close, I could feel her body tense up. We endured the day in this bizarre, suffocating atmosphere until 9 p.m. We have a dinner with Mr. Thompson from Apex Illusions tonight. You're coming with me, she finally said, her voice intentionally flat and cold. Yes, Miss Hayes. The dinner was an exclusive private club. The room was thick with smoke and the smell of alcohol. Mr. Thompson, a portly middle-aged man, had no idea who Victoria really was. His eyes kept drifting toward her, and he was particularly aggressive in pushing drinks on her. Victoria was clearly uncomfortable, but for the sake of a crucial partnership, she endured it. A fake business smile plastered on her face, drinking glass after glass that he offered under various pretenses. An unnatural flush soon appeared on her cheeks, and her gaze started to lose focus. As the dinner was winding down, Mr. Thompson staggered to his feet and, under the guise of being drunk, grabbed Victoria's wrist. His greasy face was plastered with a sickening smile. Victoria, a real powerhouse. I'm so impressed. I'll have my driver take you home. We could talk more details on the way. Victoria tried to pull her hand back, her face pale. That won't be necessary, Mr. Thompson. My assistant will make arrangements. Hey now, an assistant isn't as attentive as I am, Thompson slobbered, his other hand reaching for her shoulder as he leaned in closer. Mr. Thompson, have some self-respect. I shot to my feet, positioning myself between him and Victoria, cutting off the repulsive man. Interrupted, Thompson became furious. Emboldened by the alcohol, he pointed a finger in my face and snarled. Who the hell do you think you are? A lowly assistant dares to block me. Get out of the way. I'm talking business with your boss. Behind me, Victoria's breathing was shallow and quick. I could feel her trembling slightly. I didn't know if it was from anger or fear. When he saw that I wasn't moving, the man actually tried to shove me aside. The moment his hand came toward me, all my restraint, all the complex emotions that had been building for days, and the rage at seeing her being cornered, it all shattered my self-control. Without a moment's hesitation, I threw a hard punch right into that disgusting face. The force was so great that Mr. Thompson let out a pained cry and stumbled backward, crashing into a table of glasses and plates. They shattered on the floor with a deafening clatter. The room fell dead silent. Everyone was stunned. Victoria's eyes flew open, staring at me and the wreckage in utter disbelief. I was breathing heavily, standing in front of her, my cold gaze sweeping over the other dumbfounded people in the room. Then I turned my back on a man groaning on the floor and grabbed Victoria's cold wrist. Her hand was trembling. Let's go. I pulled her out of that nauseating room. The bitter cold wind mixed with snowflakes hit us the moment we were outside. I took a deep breath and turned around, bracing for the storm I knew was coming. I'd screwed up royally. Apex Solutions was a critical partner for the company right now. That one punch didn't just kill the deal. It would likely bring unforeseen trouble to the company. Given her work-first mentality, her anger and disappointment should have been enough to drown me. Ms. Hayes, I'm sorry. I lower my head, speaking first, my voice shaky. I was impulsive. I'll take responsibility for the consequences. Before I could finish, she wrapped her arms around me from behind. Yes, she hugged me. It was a light embrace, her arms circling my waist, her cheek pressed against my back. My entire body went rigid. Snowflakes fell silently around us. Then I heard her voice, very quiet with a barely perceptible catch in it. Thank you. Not a reprimand. Thank you. I turned around in near panic. She had to let go. Her face tilted up to look at me, the streetlight illuminating her face, her eyelashes dotted with tiny snowflakes. And in her eyes, those eyes that were always so cool and calm, there were now visible tears. It was the first time I had ever seen her look so vulnerable. My heart felt like it had been squeezed by a powerful fist. I clumsily raised my hand and carefully wiped away the moisture from the corner of her eye with my thumb. Don't be scared, Ms. Hayes. It's okay. It's all over now. I comforted her, my voice gentle in a way that surprised even me. But she shook her head. I'm not scared. Her voice trembled. She looked me right in the eye and said word by word, I'm happy. Happy. I was stunned, completely unable to understand. She sniffled, trying to force a smile that only made her look more heartbreaking. Happy that you would actually fight for me. In that moment, the world went silent, leaving only her direct words hammering against my heart. Acting on some strange impulse, I reached out and gently pulled her into my arms. She didn't resist. Her soft body fit into my embrace, carrying the chill of a night and her unique scent. She didn't return the hug. Her arms hung at her sides, and her body was still a little stiff, but she didn't push me away. The next morning, when the elevator doors chimed open and she walked in, clicking her heels, it was as if everything was back to square one, or even colder than square one. She walked past me without a glance, leaving only a trail of cold perfume. The flicker of hope and excitement that had sparked in my heart from last night's embrace was instantly doused by this bucket of cold water. An indescribable sense of disappointment began to creep in. Of course, the snow, the tear, that brief moment of reliance. They were all just accidents born of a specific situation. The sun was up, the dream was over, and she was once again the high and mighty, untouchable CEO, Victoria Hayes. I followed her into the office and closed the door. She placed her briefcase on the desk. I stood to the side, waiting for her usual cold, hard directives, but the expected orders never came. She turned around to face me. Then, while I was still trying to process it, the corners of her lips carefully, tentatively pulled upward into a tiny arc, a smile. It was faint, and it carried an obvious sense of unfamiliarity and awkwardness, but it was definitely a smile. She seemed a stranger to the expression herself. A flicker of bashfulness crossed her face, but she held my gaze. "Morning," she said. Her voice was a little lower than usual, still trying to maintain its steady tone. In that moment, I knew last night's snow hadn't been for nothing. "Morning," I replied, surprised, but immediately offering a reassuring smile of my own. As if encouraged by my response, she suddenly rested her forehead gently against my shoulder. Her voice was muffled. "So, are you willing to be my boyfriend?" Outside the window was the bustling noise of a city day, the distant ringing of phones, the faint clatter of keyboards. But inside the office, it was a vacuum-like silence, so quiet I could hear my own heart pounding like a drum. She still didn't dare look up, her ears red enough to bleed, waiting for her sentence as she stood frozen in my arms. Without hesitation, I tightened my arms around her waist, pulling her deeper into my embrace. "I am," I said, my voice low but incredibly clear against her hair. 3 years later, I pushed open the familiar door to our house. Before I could even get my shoes off, a small soft bundle of joy giggled and hugged my leg. Daddy's home." The little one tilted around, chubby face up at me, her big eyes sparkling. "Daddy," she called out in her sweet, childish voice. It was our 2-year-old daughter, Lily. My heart melted. I bent down, scooped her up, and planted a kiss on her sweet-smelling cheek. "Was Lily a good girl for Mommy today?" "I was," Lily answered loudly, her arms wrapped around my neck. Carrying my daughter, I walked into the living room. The afternoon sun poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, filling the space with warmth and tranquility. On the sofa, Victoria was sitting sideways. She was wearing a set of soft pink pajamas, her long hair casually tied up with a few stray strands falling along her neck. Stripped of all her corporate sharpness and armor, she was enveloped in a gentle, serene aura of motherhood. In her arms, she held our newborn son, Noah, her head bowed as she focused on nursing him. The little guy was nestled against her chest, eating contentedly, making soft, satisfied sounds. Hearing me and Lily, she looked up. Those eyes, which once only scrutinized reports and issued commands, were now filled with a drowning tenderness and a faint weariness. Her cheeks were a little fuller than before her pregnancy, her skin looking fair and translucent in the sunlight. She gave me a soft smile, tinged with a playful reproach, her voice a whisper so as not to startle the baby in her arms. "Quiet down. You just fell asleep." Since the later stages of her pregnancy with Noah, I had gradually taken over most of the company's core management. She had stepped back from the front lines, but she still oversaw major decisions with me, through video calls. Her sharp insight and judgment had never faded. It was just that now her entire world was more focused on me and our two little ones. I quietly walked over with Lily in my arms and sat down beside her. I naturally put my arm around her shoulder, letting her lean against me to rest. She rested her head on my shoulder and sighed softly. Her breath carried the unique fatigue of a nursing mother, but it was also filled with contentment. I looked at my son in her arms, then at my daughter, who was now perched by my leg, curiously staring at her little brother. Then I leaned down and kissed my wife's hair, which smelled faintly of milk. Outside the window in the garden, the roses she had planted herself a few years ago were blooming beautifully. Huge clusters of pink and white flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The cold, vast CEO's office, the desk piled high with documents, the suffocating silence, the panicked tears and threats on that snowy night, the alcohol-scented embrace after the disastrous dinner. All of it, the entire past, had finally melted into this one quiet, sun-drenched moment in our living room. And here in my arms, I was holding my entire family.